Hey, what's up guys? Thanks so much for checking out the video. Today we're going to be walking through an installation of a 3rd gen Tacoma high clearance dual swing out bumper. I do want to point out that this video will cover our high clearance bumper without the swing outs. Also, if you have sensors, this bumper will not work with those parking sensors. However, with your camera, there's no wiring that you have to actually splice and cut and everything. So we're just going to be relocating the camera into the bumper itself. Now we're just going to kind of go through the components and pieces of what you'll expect.
Here's what you're going to see when you open the box. You'll have the bumper and the mounting hardware. The bumper, I want to point out, is steel, heavy-duty construction. It includes 3/4 inch thick recovery points, as well as a 2-inch receiver hidden behind the license plate. The big swing out panels are aluminum for weight savings. So for both bumpers, swing out and non-swing out alike, you'll have these same frame mounting brackets, the side wing supports, mounting hardware, LED license plate lights, and this extension that, for your trailer plug to extend it out to the new location. And for the swing out bumper, you'll also have the swing arms that we're going to mount the panels to. They're steel, some miscellaneous hardware, pre-greased bearings. You'll get the rubber bumper plastic pads, latch assembly, stainless glide plates, and then the large aluminum panels for your accessories. Today we're going to be installing a tire carrier on this particular truck.
Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to install some of these smaller components into the bumper. They're just much easier to do now instead of on the truck. So we have our Pathfinder flush mounted lights that will go right over there. And then these are our tag lights, like Evan said earlier. They'll go right here. And then we have these little stainless glide plates that'll kind of go over here, so your T-handle will actually have a locked position so your door can stay open. So we're going to do that real quick. Alright, so we just installed these wear plates on the side, the tag lights and the Pathfinder lights, which we got to do this because it's the most satisfying thing ever. So we got those in. Evan's almost done with that last plate. And also right here, I wanted to show this camera bracket. So that'll actually go right in there. And then your license plate goes there. So yeah, now we're set to actually start some of the bumper removal process.
All right, the first step in removing the stock bumper is to take off this big black plastic cap. And it's mostly going to be these little plastic push pins that you'll use your trim tool for. We'll need to take out the license plate lights and the trailer wiring plug, possibly the 2 inner sensors. I'm not sure yet. I haven't actually done one with sensors myself, so we'll find that out as we go. It's easier to pop this out of the bumper and then unplug the wiring from it. If you haven't done it before, to get it out of the bumper, it's just these 2 metal tabs you can feel on the backside. They're kind of springy. So squeeze them in and then push it towards the rear of the truck, and then you can access the tab for the wiring plug a little easier. Now the license plate lights, they're kind of tricky to get to. I'm just going to kind of gently work it out through the front side here. There it is. Okay, after you've removed the license plate lights and the trailer wiring plug and the little plastic push clips, all you have to do to take the cap off is pop up. It's in there pretty good, so it's a pretty sharp tug that it takes. And a note, if you have sensors, go in there and pull the wiring clip off the back of the sensor before you pop it out. Before you unbolt the actual bumper frame, there's this wiring harness that runs along in here for the license plate lights, parking sensors, and anything else. There's a couple plugs just next to the frame rail back in here that you need to unplug so the bumper can come off. And then it's 5 bolts per side. This one, the 2 on the top above the frame, and the 2 on the top on the bottom of the frame. 12mm socket. With the bumper off, the last step of the removal process is the hitch. We've got 5 bolts per side. They use a 17mm socket. And then there's a little safety feature built in here. There's a little pin welded onto the hitch that's in a slot in the frame right there. So don't worry, that's going to keep it from falling while you take the bolts out. Now we're just going to lift up and pull the hitch back off the frame. We want to retain the factory wiring harness for the LED license plate lights. So we're just going to take the old harness out of the old bumper and reuse what sections of it we need. So it's just clipped in with these little clips. You can just kind of pinch the top and they'll come out. And if you have the parking sensors, then you're going to want to take this cap off so you can access it. It's got a couple of these plastic rivets here and here, and then 3 more of them underneath. There's a few good little clips in here holding it into the bumper. So I just need to be able to unplug this parking sensor here. I'm gonna loosen this wiring harness up a bit. Also, this truck has the blind spot assist. The blind spot assist does not function with this aftermarket bumper, so we're just gonna unplug it. Okay, we're gonna extend this trailer wiring harness a little bit. We include an extension with heat shrink connections pre-crimped on one end or 2 ends. And then also in your wiring bag, you'll get these little spade connectors, and those are for your LED license plate lights. What we just found out is that for 2021, they've obviously changed the color of 3 of the wires. It doesn't matter, but just make sure that at the end of the day, the red one is connected back to red, yellow to yellow, and brown to brown. The 4 larger wires are all the same color as the previous generation. You have 2 big wires, a blue and a white, and the bigger wires are denoted by these yellow connectors. So there's your blue and white. Then as far as the next size down, you've got a green and a black, which are these 2 here. And then you have 3 light wires, brown, a yellow, and a red on this truck. On previous generations, it was blue, white, and purple. So we'll likely use the white for the yellow, the blue for the brown, and the purple to red. But it doesn't matter how you do it, just as long as this end and this end end up the same after the cut. Just out of good practices, I'm going to cut these one at a time. I don't think there's any current going to any of these, but just to be safe, we'll cut them one at a time, and we're going to leave ourselves plenty of room on each end of the wires to work. Okay, we just finished this wiring harness extension, got it all taped up, so that's ready. This next step, I disassembled the OEM wire harness that was in the factory bumper. It's a little bit of an unnecessary step, but I thought it looked cleaner. So we just kept the wires that we needed for the actual license plate lights. The rest of the sensor wires are unneeded with this bumper. Even if you don't choose to do that, you'll still need to cut the ends off the connectors for the OEM license plate lights and put on these little blue spade connectors that come with the kit. So I've done both ends of this. Now we're going to cut off the ends of the wires that come on the lights and put the opposite ends onto those 4 wires, and then we'll be ready to put this bumper on. All right, it's a fresh start. We got the tear down and most of the prep work done yesterday. Now we're going to work on making our cut, making our measurements, and putting this thing on. So to make our cut, we're going to use a little bit of a triangulation so we can ensure an accurate cut, because not everybody has access to the top of their bedside to measure down, for instance, if you have a camper shell. So we're going to measure from an arbitrary point on this curve here. So I'm going to start by using some masking tape and a Sharpie to highlight this body line so I can see it a little bit more clearly. I'm going to trace this section right through here, right on the edge of the curve. Then we're going to measure from the front radius of this taillight cutout at the closest point towards the front of the truck, 22.5 inches, and mark where that crosses that line we just drew. That'll give us an accurate point to measure down from. You want to measure straight down 15 inches. Make sure your tape's hanging straight, not forward, not back. And it's okay to let it wrap around your fender flare here. And mark 15 inches. At the back by the taillight, we're going to pick this crease here, this body line. We're going to measure down exactly 3 inches from that point. We're also going to need to cut back through here. I'm using a different color marker because the truck's black. We're basically just going to make a line that's parallel or offset from this line about 3/4 of an inch in until we get to this bottom crease here. And this is going to be the other edge. We'll draw a straight line over to about where it starts to bend, and then we're just going to connect the two with a big lazy radius. Also, you don't want to get too close to this edge here. You want to leave a little bit of meat, so we'll smooth that over as well. Now we'll use tape to connect the 2 black lines we made for our cut. Expect to do a few adjustments while doing this because it's really easy for this tape to get a curve in it. And of course, it's such a funky shape on the bedside here. Just sight down it a few times. Okay, we just lost audio, so I'm going to do a recap of what we just did. There are 3 screws here with a 10mm head. Take those out. And then on the back side, the blocks that those screw into, we're just going to break them out of the way with pliers. The 3 we just screwed into, and then there's 1 up above the brace. Now that those are out of there, we can grab the fender liner and pull it out and pull it forward up over the tire and get it out of our way. And then we're going to take the top 2 bolts out of this brace so it's free when we make the bedside cut. Okay, time to cut. Safety first. Now that we've got both sides cut, I'm going to use the blending wheel and clean up the cut just a little bit to get rid of the sharp spots. And you're not going to want to do the edge trim just yet. I think next you're going to want to test fit the bumper and make sure your cut's good before you finish this with the edge trim.
All right guys, so we just made the bedside cuts. The bumper is basically ready. The next step we're going to do is relocate this camera. Now if you're doing the bumper without the swing outs, you don't have to relocate the camera because it's just going to be right there. For the swing out we're going to. So it's really easy. We're just going to pop the tailgate and you're going to grab a T30 Torx bit and you're just going to go around at all these different Torx bolts, and we're going to actually remove this panel right here. All right, also take note, the smaller ones are this parameter here, and these bigger ones go in the front. So just when you're putting them back in, make sure you get those right. All right, so it's kind of recessed in here, so you should just be able to lift it up and pull it towards you just like that. And then right down here, I don't know if you can see it very well, here's the camera housing. There's a couple different bolts here. I think they're 10mm, I'll verify that, but we'll take those out. All right, so it is a 10mm. So you might need an extension to get down in there, but it's this bolt here and this bolt back here on the right. So we'll loosen those up. And then there's some clips kind of holding this harness in, but we should be able to get it out just like that. And then we'll actually work on kind of prying these clips out of the way. All right, so we just took this clip out, and if you look back here, this is kind of held in with this little clip. You can just pry that out, and basically this one too, and basically what we're going to do is run this cable through this little hole in the tailgate. There's a little square opening, so we'll kind of tuck it through there. We're just going to disconnect this. There's a little tab you press pretty hard on there, so that'll come out, and that'll give us room so we can pull the camera through this little opening. So this is actually his tailgate lock, so we're going to keep that in the tailgate, but this right here, you're just going to fish through that little opening down there. And then you should be able to put these clips back in so it's nice and tight. All right, so we just tucked the wire back in there into the hole and put that clip back on. Now you're going to get a really tiny Phillips screwdriver, and you're going to separate the camera from this housing, and we're actually going to put the housing back in where it came from, and we're just going to take the camera out. All right, so we just ran the wire through that little opening. So now what you want to do is kind of block this void that we created when we took out the camera. So we ran some tape in here just to kind of block out the dust and stuff. And it's up to you whether you want to reinstall this or not. We're just going to go ahead just because it's really easy. So we'll just put those two 10mm bolts back. And then the very last step to wrap this up is just going to be putting that final plastic piece on it.
Before we put the bumper on, we've got 2 holes to drill, one on each side. It's going to be for these bumper side wing supports. So there's an existing hole in the bottom of the frame that will line this bottom hole up with, and then we're going to mark for the side hole. So we're going to drill the hole through the side of the frame. So I don't know if you can see it. It's kind of right under this rectangular cutout. There's a hole right there. I'm going to line up the bottom holes and use a marker to mark this side hole. These are a left and a right. It's pretty obvious if you grab the wrong one and try to put it on, it's going to look a little goofy. Nothing's going to bolt up to it. And of course, like always, it's easiest to step up in drill bit size. So I'm going to start with roughly a 1/4 inch and work my way up to, it's just under a 1/2 inch. We're using 7/16 hardware, so as long as you get up to a 7/16 hole. Same thing on the other side. Now it's time to start putting stuff on the truck. We're going to start with the bumper mounts. These aren't marked left and right, but you can't put them on wrong based on the hole pattern. You're going to use the factory hardware that held the hitch in place. Use that same 17mm socket. And we're going to put this on and let it just hang on the bolts. That'll put it at the bottom of its adjustment, and if we need to lift it up later, we can. We're going to run these bolts in, but not tighten them down yet. We've got the mounts on the frame. They're loose enough that you can move them if you have to. When we tighten them down to the bumper, it'll kind of pull them into place. One more thing you're going to want to do is run your wiring harness through the back side of the bumper. That's the cleanest way to do it. You don't have to. You can put this in later, but I'm going to fish it through the inside of the bumper from this access hole to this access hole. That way I can plug in my license plate lights. When you actually install the bumper on the mounts, we've included these nut strips. You'll see there's a tall and a short for each side. They correspond with these mounting holes. So this keeps you from having to use a nut and a backup wrench. So you'll hold it on the inside while you get it started. So we've got everything prepped and ready. I like to use a transmission jack for a bumper this heavy and an extra hand to balance it. It's possible to do it without it, but this makes it a lot easier. We're going to set this on and rest it on the mounts. While you're getting everything situated, the underside of the top of the bumper will rest on the mount, so it's not like we're going to have to hold it forever. Okay, if you got it, I'm going to stick a couple bolts in. Hard to see with me in there and doing it at the same time, but here's what it should look like installed. That has the nut strip behind it, and those two 7/16 bolts are in. We'll do the same on the inside. Okay, we checked our fitment. We did a dry run. We like where the cut is. So before we tighten everything up, we have just enough space with the bumper kind of hanging down to put this edge strip on. You should have enough to do both sides in this one strip. You can elect whether or not you want to put it on the flare. We're just going to cover the bedside from the back under the taillight to where the flare starts, and we're going to leave the flare just cut, but you can put it on if you want. So you just start at one end, press it on, and when we get to the other end, we'll cut off the excess and go to the other side. So once we get this done, we're going to adjust our bumper so that it has roughly a level 1/4 inch gap all the way down. It's a good time to ask for another helping hand to hold it in place while you tighten it down. Okay, we just got our adjustment set. All the bolts are tightened down. You use the bolts that go into the bumper from the back to adjust the height, the left and right height, and get that the same. Also, your left and right adjustment. And tighten that down with a 5/8 socket. You can actually get an impact in there. And then if your twist isn't right, if this line isn't parallel with the cut you made, that's going to be the bolts that go into your frame that used to hold your hitch on. So you can loosen those a little bit, get the tilt just right, and then nail it. So we're really happy with the gap we've got here. It's all tightened down. We're going to install these mounts that we drilled for a minute ago. Just a quick note, what you don't want to do is install both these from the same direction where you're having to fight. So just turn one of them out as you install it. I like to do it this way so you don't have a bolt, a nut hanging down from the frame. But either way, it's up to you. On the outer end, you have 2 horizontal slotted holes here, and there's 2 vertical slotted holes on the front of the bumper that you're going to use 1/4 inch hardware for. Once you get that bolted on, you can zip tie your mud flap, your wheel liner back down, cut the rest of it off, and then reconnect your wiring. All right, we have the cross brace put in, tightened down the 1/4 inch hardware, 7/16 hardware. We trimmed the bottom of this wheel liner flush with the bottom of the cross brace. And just a note, we decided to sandwich the liner between the backside of the bumper and the cross brace. We thought it looked a little bit cleaner. We did have to drill a hole through the plastic liner to get this upper bolt in, but we thought it was worth it. And then we just used a single zip tie and wrapped around through an existing hole. If you want more zip ties, there's a couple holes right about here in the brace that you can choose to punch through your liner and zip tie. So that's what it should look like all buttoned up. Okay, one of the last steps for the non-swing out bumper is to connect the wire harness. So we've connected the trailer harness to the trailer plug and pushed the trailer plug in. And now we're connecting the license plate lights. This is a 2020 Tacoma. I can't say this will be the same for all trucks because they seem to change this from time to time, but on this 2020, we're able to connect the white wire on the harness to the white wire on the license plate light. And there's a blue on this side that's going to connect to the black. And on the driver's side, it was a green wire that connects to the black. So we're going to connect those, hide our wires, zip tie everything up, and we should be done under here. I'm sure this part's self-explanatory, but the very last step for the non-swing out is your license plate. Okay, first step for the swing out specific, we're going to assemble the driver's side door. All it really needs is the latch installed. You can discard this latch piece. We don't need it. We have our own built into the bumper. This round piece goes in there. You're going to turn, you'll notice it has a flat side machined. We're going to turn it towards the handle. Before we install this U-bolt, we're going to put the jam nuts on and then the lock nuts. We'll just put those on finger tight for now. We'll adjust it after the bumper's on. Then we're going to bolt the latch onto this pad here like this so that the U-bolt is below the door. And we're going to put the hardware that holds it on. We'll put a washer on the top side and a washer and a lock washer on the underside. Now we're going to switch to the passenger side door. This one's pretty simple. It doesn't need much but this big heavy-duty rubber bumper and this glide pad, and this has this bevel on it so it'll assist if your door ever sags at all. It'll help it ramp up onto the bed. It's gonna ride basically right there. So it goes with the bevel towards what's the front of the truck or away from the front of the door. We've got these little countersink bolts for it. It's a 5/32 Allen and a 7/16 wrench. This little red rubber bumper acts as a stop to keep this first door from closing too far and hitting your tailgate. It's going to stop right next to the license plate. We give you some extra washers, so if you need to shim it out a little bit, you can. I'm just going to start with one. We've got a lock washer as well. That's going to use a 9/16 wrench. Okay, I've got one of our swing arms here. This happens to be the passenger side. Before we put it on, we need to put the lower bearing in and then the grease seal. So when you get the bearings, they are pre-greased. Grab one, drop it in, and then we're going to drive this seal in. It has kind of an open side and a solid side. We're going to put this solid side up, or if you look at the actual seal, you can see that the seal is shaped so that it's geared towards holding the grease in, just like a axle seal basically, or a wheel bearing seal. If you have a seal driver, great, you can use that. If not, a redneck seal driver works great. I've got an 1 7/16 socket here, or you can just try the hammer, but really using a seal driver is going to be the way to go because this happens. It just kind of rocks back and forth. Check every now and then to make sure it's going in straight. I'm going to drive it so that it's just barely flush with the bottom of this chamfer in the housing. Okay, I think we're good. Put it on the truck, grab your top bearing and the washer and the castle nut, and we'll do that next. Okay, before we put this swing arm on, we're going to remove this tape. This is high heat tape made to go through the powder coat oven to protect the threads. So we're going to peel it off. Okay, time to put this on. Then drop on your top bearing large flat washer, and then castle nut. And we're going to torque this down until there's a pretty good drag on this. You don't want it to spin too freely. It's probably about right. See, it won't free spin, but it's not too hard to move. I'm not going to put the cotter pin in because there's a decent chance we'll adjust it before we're done. And then we also have the top cap to put on, so I'm going to leave those two until later. We have both swing arms on. Now we're going to drop our T-handles in. Just to note, these have a 90-degree position and about, I believe it's 105 degree. I think it's 15 degrees past 90 if I remember right. Just got the second side done. There's the 90-degree position. There's the 105. If for whatever reason it doesn't line up like it didn't on this side, the pin didn't line up in the hole, just loosen these two bolts and get it to where it does line up and then tighten it back down. Next step is to mount the door panels to the swing arms. I've got the hardware ready. We're going to put them through from the front side. There we go. Do the washer, lock washer, then nut. We have both doors loosely on, both panels loosely on. I've put it in the closed position, closing this one first. I've got it resting on its little pad. The first thing we want to do is try to get these as level as possible. So I want this gap here to match this gap over here. So for now, I'm just going to use something as a shim to make it roughly level. In our case, handles on these pliers seem to work out about right. The first thing I notice is that the doors are too far in by quite a bit, which is kind of what we talked about earlier with spacing on this bumper. So I'm going to take this off and add a couple shims to the backside to pull these out a little bit. Then we're going to add just a single washer underneath this pad. We're going to kind of preload it just a little bit so that when we put some weight on it, if it sags at all, it should end up just about right. So I'm going to start by moving this bumper out a little bit and then snugging some of these bolts down. Okay, I'm going to tighten these down. I prefer to crank these down in place, so I'm going to use a socket, an 11/16 on the back side that I can just fish in there, and my impact on the front with a 5/8. Great, I'm going to tighten down the rest of the bolts and then tighten down this latch, and then we'll go through the process of adjusting the latch. I just tightened up the latch to the panel with 1/2-inch wrenches. Now we're going to adjust the U-bolt on the latch. So latch it and then start tightening down these main nuts until there's a pretty good tension on it. We'll test it a few times. It's hard to say how much tension to put on it. It's hard to convey that in words. It's more of a feel thing, but you want it to take a pretty good push to snap it into place. You want a pretty good snap. I'd say we're getting pretty close. I think that's good for now. We can always tighten it up if needed. Then we're going to run these jam nuts against it, tighten it down where it won't adjust itself later for us. So smooth. All the adjustments done, everything's tightened down. Now that we know we're good with that, we're going to put the cotter pins through the spindle and put the cap on. These caps can be a major pain to fit on. They're such a tight fit. I've seen a couple methods. You can crimp it, kind of like the same idea as a coffee filter. What I like to do is put a few slices in it with my cutoff wheel very carefully so I don't cut up into the crimp. And that way I can bend these in like little tabs like ductwork. In either case, we're going to use some clear silicone around this top here to seal out any water. Okay, earlier we rerouted the wires for the backup camera. This shows the camera bolted into the bracket. You're going to reuse the same 2 screws that you took out of the plastic housing. Make sure and note which way is up on your camera so it's not upside down on your display. For us, there was some writing and a large F on the top. The top of the bracket has the shield to protect it, and then you'll use 1/4-inch hardware to install it through the front side of the bumper. I guess we should plug it in too. We just finished installing the Pathfinder scene lights. We've got all our wires cleaned up and zip tied up, and that completes the installation of the bumper. Now we're going to install the optional tire carrier. This is the Toyota Tacoma tire carrier. It comes loose with the hardware in a bag. We're going to press the studs in. If you have access to a shop press, that's definitely an easier, simpler way to do this. If you don't, no worries. You can drive it in with a punch and a hammer, and that's how we're going to do it today. Make sure you turn these the right direction instead of like that. You want your studs pointing out towards your tire, of course. That one felt solid. You can usually hear the difference. We have the front half with all 4 studs pressed into place. We're going to grab the back half, bolt it with these U shape facing down to these 4 holes here. All right, with that on, we're going to leave it a little loose. We'll tighten everything down at the same time. This has multiple holes to set the depth. We measured the back spacing for this truck. And when I say back spacing, I don't actually mean back spacing because I'm including the tire, but the distance from the edge of the tire to the mounting pad on this truck is 7 inches. So that's what we're going to set this depth at. I'm actually going to set it about an 1/8 inch shy, so when he snugs the tire down, it pulls up really tight. So I'll check that again before I tighten it down. I'm going to put the bolts in through the sides and the top, set his depth at just under 7 inches, and that'll have it finished up. Okay, that's got it all wrapped up. That concludes the installation of our 3rd Gen Tacoma high clearance and high clearance swing out rear bumper. Just a quick recap. We pulled off the factory bumper, factory hitch, did our bedside cut, we installed the mounts, hung the bumper on the mounts, got it all adjusted right, did the edge trim, tightened everything down, and then we did the swing arms, the big panels, the T-handles, the latch, and the tire carrier, and then all of our wiring, and we have everything zip tied and tucked up clean. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at backwoodsadventuremods.com.